This area of my layout is going to be an engine servicing facility for the Blue Ridge and Western, my freelance railroad. But it needs a few more facilities if it's going to handle the engines coming in for service. I have had this Walthers N-Scale Industrial Office kit in my closet for about a year now, and I thought it would be a perfect fit. So let's build this thing using some simple techniques and a few goofs, so be on the lookout for that. By the way, this video is sponsored by Model Railroad Academy, and I'll talk more about that later. Okay, the first thing we need to do is prep for paint. I like to get as many parts painted before I assemble them, so we need to start by cutting our parts free. I use two different things for cutting parts. I use some flush cutters for easy cuts, and for small parts I use an X-Acto knife or a hobby knife if you don't have one of those. I'm going to assemble a couple of things before painting: the main walls of the building and the small lean-to shed. I need to sand the little burrs from the kit off, and for the big part, the lion's share of it, I use a file for sanding, and then when I get to where I'm doing just the final sanding and smoothing it out, I use a 3200 grit sanding sponge to smooth everything out. Once this is done, I am going to glue the walls of the building together. Now to do this, I'm using some Tamiya plastic cement, so technically I'm not gluing it, I'm cementing them together. Now plastic cement, like I said, isn't actually a glue. It causes a chemical reaction with the ABS plastic and it melts a little bit, and then when you put the pieces together with that on there, it pushes together and they fuse together when they dry. Now I'm also going to be using 1, 2, 3 blocks to square the corners as I cement them in place. By the way, I should mention that all of these tools and supplies are going to be linked in the description if you want to pick some of them up. Once I have this, I can prep the other parts for paint. Now what I like to do is partially trim away the extra plastic, the flashing and things like that, but I do leave some of it in. Think the tubes that in there, the little paths they have for the plastic to get in there when they're molding it. This is because when I paint, I either use spray paint or an airbrush for this particular part, and these parts tend to be blown all over the place if they're by themselves. So keeping them partially attached and together makes them heavier and they don't move around nearly as much. Now, if you like tips and tricks like this, you should definitely check out Model Railroad Academy. They're today's sponsor, and they have a full library of tutorials and layout videos. Now, one thing I actually really enjoy is their older layout videos. These serve as some really awesome inspiration for really just getting into your build process. Now, right now, you can sign up at the link in the description and get your first full year of Model Railroad Academy for just $1.49. That's for new members only, by the way. Check it out at the link in the description below. Okay, let's paint. I'm going to be using spray paint for this. I love using spray paint for models. I'm going to paint the inside of the building black first. This is in case I want to light the building down the road. That way we don't get any light leak where like the walls look like they're glowing. Now it's time to assemble the building. First, I'm going to attach the walls to the base. Now to do this, I've got a lot of spray paint on there, so I need to make sure that some of the actual base plastic is clear and I can do the cement and the chemical reactions going to happen. So I scrape some of the paint away with an X-Acto knife. I then break out the plastic cement and put it on there and attach it. I then paint the trim of the lean-to shed. I'm doing this with just some plain old dollar store cheapo base white acrylic paint and a fine tip brush. I'd say the brush is probably more important than the actual paint, but I'm also going to be weathering this, so if I don't get it perfect, the weathering can cover up any blemishes. So if you're doing this, if you do a little bit of weathering, a lot of times that can cover up any little mishaps you have. I then do the same process to attach the building using the Tamiya plastic cement. After that, I can attach the roof. Next up, I'm putting the drain pipe in along the back. I use flush cutters to remove the big flashing and then an X-Acto knife on the small flashing. The part has small pins that correspond with holes on the wall, so I put little dots of plastic cement on that and I attach it. Now I do still have those little bits of white from where I cut away the flashing. I'll address those later. Now it is time for the doors. I remove these with the flush cutters and then cement them in place. Since they are on the inside, I do not need to trim the excess off or be as thorough with it. Now it's window time, and I mean window time because this building has a lot of windows for its size. Now these I cut out with an X-Acto knife because it's really small and there's very little difference between the edge of the window and the actual the flashing. So that's one thing that the X-Acto knife is really good. Now I still may need to do a bit of trim to get them to fit, but they're all inside so I don't have to be perfect. And then it's just a lot of applying and cementing these in place. Now, one thing that's really good for windows like these that have like everything and all the detail is tweezers. It's great for grabbing them and placing parts like these without getting your fingers in there and potentially messing things up, especially if you have big fingers like me. Now, and the brushes you're seeing me use right here as well, I believe it's nylon tips. I tried to figure it out. It's some sort of not typical material. I believe it's nylon, but those don't dissolve in the cement. If you just use a normal brush in the plastic cement, it's gonna slowly dissolve away. So you wanna use a brush with something like nylon on the brushes, on the bristles. Now it's pretty much all about applying details. This includes the handrails, the awning, and the roof. And the roof is where I made a goof. Hey, that rhymed, roof and goof. So during the year and a half I had the kit, I did open it at first and take a look, and my room gets a little bit disorganized, and I somehow lost a little section with the vents and the chimney for the roof. So we'll need to do a little bit of improvisation. So what I did was I used some flashing from the kit that I've already painted black to give it a bit of a vintage look. These actually came from the drain pipe, so I'd cut those off with an X-Acto knife and I put those on there and just glued them in place, and they actually look pretty good. Now, for where the chimney is, I needed to use some of the flashing from the paths that the molten plastic went in. I had some more of that I had already painted black, and what I did is basically cut it to size, and then I sanded each side smooth, so it's basically like a little, kind of like a chimney pipe. And then I had some scrap styrene laying around. I think it's 0.04 styrene, and I cut it into a nice little square, sanded off the edges and everything, and then I painted everything black and then glued that, or cemented that, on the chimney hole, and that works like really, really great. It actually turned out way better than I thought it would. So if you have to do little fixes like this, don't overlook your flashing and other things that you might consider trash, because they can actually save you. Like, it just saved me from having to buy another kit just to get the parts again. Next, we need to do a little bit of that touch-up paint that I mentioned earlier, especially with the drain pipe. We're just putting a little bit using a micro brush, and this is some Vallejo black. Then we can weather, and I'm using some weathering powders for this. I'll be using a brown dirt, a black soot, and a snow weathering. I start with the brown along the bottom. Now, this gives the appearance of dirt slowly accumulating on the bottom. If you ever look at a building, a lot of times the bottom is pretty dusty and dirty, because that's basically where it makes contact with the ground and all that gets there. But I also take any sort of the excess that I have on the brushes and I just kind of weather the whole wall. One thing this does, it's kind of similar to dry brushing a rock. It accentuates like the little brick mortar lines and things like that, and it makes the building just looks a little better. And these things are also pretty forgiving as well. Now I move on to the black, and I use it to make faded runoff streaks beneath the windows. This is one of my favorite little techniques for doing weathering is these little faded runoff streaks. It's just something when you add a little bit of it, it looks so great. Now this is basically like if it's been raining or something and the rain's running down the side of the building, it's grabbing some of the dirt and grime of the building and just kind of streaking it down below the windows, because it all kind of like, because it's a different surface, it pools and everything. If you go and look at buildings, you'll actually see it on some buildings. So, and like I said, the powder is pretty forgiving, so you can have some real fun with this. Now you may have been saying, why was I going to use a snow powder? Well, the snow powder is actually really good for fading things. Now I'm using this on the roof and I'm going to fade it a little bit. If you have anything that's been out of the sun for any extended period of time, you know that there is sun fade. UV rays and everything are fading that color. So I don't want this to be a flat new black on top. So I'm using the snow color to fade that black a little bit and make it look a little bit more real. This is also a great way you can do this on locomotives and things like that that sit out in the sun. So this is a really good thing, this little snow powder. Then all I gotta do is some touch-ups and we're done. Now, typically if I'm doing rolling stock or locomotives, I seal them in, but that can be a little bit of a process, and because buildings aren't being handled regularly like locomotives and rolling stock, I typically don't usually seal them. It just really depends on this, but I'm not gonna seal this one. Now, once I've got all that done, I can put the window glass in. Now, one thing I do like about Walther's kits is the window glass is kind of pre-made. I've built a lot of DPM kits, the Design Preservation Models kits, and those just literally give you a sheet of clear acrylic and are like, cut it out and good luck. But these have windows that are pre-designed to be able to stick right in there, and it works really, really well. It's probably the best of the windows of all the different kits I've used. And all you have to do is align it where the pins are and just pop them right in. And I do this last because I don't want it to mess with the weathering and have anything that happens with it. So if you want to have your windows have some weathering on them, you can either do it before you do the weathering, you can put those in, or you can just add a little bit of weathering outside and put it on in there. And here's the result. And here is the building on my layout. I am placing it where the previous building was and moving that building to where the siding is, where the engines are going to be. It's just a better fit, and it feels more like the office would be a little bit further away from the tracks than the machine shop would be, and that should be next to the engine, so we're going to do that. I do have a lot more work to get this detailed and looking the way I want to, but this is a great start, and I'm really happy I was able to finally use that kit. And as I'm forming my full operation scheme for this and basically designing what this railroad does, this is going to be an asset for those operations. So I'm pretty excited about that. You're going to see more projects with this. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, and happy railroading.